Hey guys, I'm Rich from NeoWin. Today we're unboxing the Huawei Mate 20 and the Mate 20 Pro. So I am super pumped for this. Those that follow my work know that the P20 Pro was one of my favorite Android phones ever, let alone this year. Granted, there are other great Android phones. I love the Pixel 3 XL. I'm pumped for the OnePlus 6T. But these are it for me, and I think it's a real shame that they're not sold in the United States because, honestly, I love the cameras on them. I love what they did with them, particularly on the Pro because it has that 40-megapixel sensor that we first saw with the P20 Pro. The Mate 20 does not have that, and that's okay. It's still a great camera, and I said this when I reviewed the P20 and the P20 Pro because I reviewed them both, and the thing about the P20 was that it was an excellent successor to the P10. It just kind of lived in the P20 Pro's shadow because the P20 Pro's camera was that good. So I think the same thing's going to happen with the Mate 20 here. So we're going to get this out of the box first because this is definitely the less exciting one, and there are some really cool features on the Pro, like an in-display fingerprint reader, and that's not on the non-Pro model. So this one that they sent me is Midnight Blue. So this is just a regular blue color, and it's awesome. So it has sort of a textured back, which feels really nice, and it doesn't really look like a textured back. You can see the lines on it, and the reason for that is just so it feels a little more comfortable to hold. And the Midnight Blue one and one other color has it, but the Twilight, which you're going to see on the Mate 20 Pro in just a moment, that does not have the textured back. So let's get the Pro open and let's take a look at the different color, because Twilight, while it's absolutely lovely, it looks a little different this time around. So let's just get this off. All right, so we can see it starts at kind of blue to purple to black. Okay, and the difference is that on the P20, where they first started using these gradient colors, it went from like a cyan to purple, or purple to cyan. So they later introduced a new color of the P20 Pro called Morpho Aurora or something, and that was actually this. So now they're just calling this Twilight, and it's absolutely stunning. This is definitely one of the prettiest phones that you're ever going to come across, at least. Well, I should say this year, because who knows what will happen next year. I suggested to them because Huawei did fly a bunch of journalists out to Europe, and we saw their Huawei Design Center in Paris, and I told them I would love to see like a green to gold. I just want to see more gradient colors, because I feel like this is an area that's not explored in smartphones enough, because really, it's very unique, and you're seeing some companies copy that, which is pretty cool, by the way, and I'll get to that. Notice the camera module is different. The P20 and the P20 Pro is very, very much like the iPhone X. Huawei is using a pretty unique camera module design here, and you notice that Huawei is kind of shifting in their aesthetics. They're not copying as much anymore. Honestly, I've spoken to Huawei about this a couple years ago, and if I asked them why their software looked like iOS or something, they say, well, customers want an iOS experience. You know, if you want an iPhone, but you don't want to buy an iPhone, you could buy a Huawei phone. Huawei is kind of branching off into its own now, and what I love about it is that they started using this gradient color with the P20 Pro. Now we're seeing other phones copying Huawei's designs rather than Huawei copying Apple's designs or some other company. Really, this is just, it's a beautiful idea. So let's see what else is in the box. By the way, you can see that this is the only one with a fingerprint reader on the back. And they kind of did the same thing with the Mate 20 last year, where the Mate 20 had a more standard design, and the Mate 20 Pro had, I'm going to say, a more trendy design. So this is kind of stuck, but here we go. Same thing. SIM pin. I assume the box contents are the same. Comes with headphones, which should be USB Type-C, because there is no headphone jack on these phones. It's USB Type-C. Type-C to 3.5 millimeter adapter. Type A to Type-C cable for charging. And of course, a power adapter that doesn't really work in the United States without an adapter. Okay, and we have the exact same thing in the Mate 20 box. So like I said, last year with the Mate 10, what they did was the Mate the Mate 10 had a more standard design. The Mate 20 Pro had some of those trendy features, I called them. The Mate 20 Pro had the fingerprint reader on the back. It was the first one that expanded the display to kind of kill off the bezels, and which is the trend, right? The longer display rather than 16:9. So the Mate 10 kept that 16:9 display, where the Mate 10 Pro moved the fingerprint reader to the back. Mate 10 had it on the bottom. So we're kind of seeing the same thing here. The Mate 20 Pro, I'm getting a little confused between the Mate 20 and the Mate 10 because I find the product numbers to be a little confusing. Like you see, no fingerprint reader. So what we have here, we have a notch at the top for Face ID, and most importantly, there's an in-display fingerprint reader. Obviously, no facial recognition and no in-display fingerprint reader on this phone. It probably does have facial recognition, I should say, but it's not going to be as good as this one. So this has the depth sensing that you see on new iPhones, and what you get there is that basically you can't fool it. So we're going to go with English here, and I'm going to have to pick United States because this is not a phone that's native to the United States. So it has the depth sensing features that you'll have on iPhones, and that means you can't fool it with like a selfie. With a lot of Android phones, you're going to find the majority of Android phones, they'll usually have an advanced setting or something that takes a long time, but the majority of Android phones, you could take a selfie with one phone and then hold it up to your phone, and it'll just allow you into the phone because it doesn't have any kind of depth sensing. So you can fool it with a selfie pretty easily. So you can't with this. If this has facial recognition, I'm sure that you can with this. Okay, so I am not entirely pleased to say that the setup experience is still a hot mess, and I don't use the term hot mess loosely or really at all. So let's set up this Fingerprint ID. All right, so you see how this works here. We're going to say enroll fingerprint, I think. All right, so we got to do it on this spot here. So fingerprint, please press firmly on the icon below. So the thing about this is that it only works on this spot. It's not like you can just it's not like you can just touch anywhere on the display to unlock it. You really just have to touch this spot. And I'm going to use both facial recognition and fingerprint edges. And we're going to set this up too. All right. And you can see, here's the thing. Huawei makes really good fingerprint sensors. And I first realized this with the P10. The P10. These numbers are confusing me for some reason. I first noticed that when I first got that phone, this was back in the day when good fingerprint readers were kind of rare. And I would actually try different fingers to make sure that it was actually scanning anything because it was just so fast. This was back when like Touch ID first came out on the iPhone, and I remember Samsung phones at the time, you had to swipe your finger across the button, and then Samsung first did on the S6 where you could actually press your finger on it, and it wasn't good at all. So just trying to set up the Mate 20 here, notice it's going a lot. Press the edge of your finger against the sensor. Notice that all went very quickly. That was all very easy. We're not going to set up face unlock for this, although maybe we will to compare them. We'll do it later. Enable all services. All right, so we are finally all set up. I set up facial recognition on the Mate 20 Pro, and yeah, it was a little bit of a pain to set up. Like I said, Huawei has very good fingerprint sensors, and really some of the best around. So I did try this out at the event. I had a demo, and it does seem to be very fast. We could try it, right? So if we just sign that in, fingerprint not recognized, that is not good. Unable. There we go. We're in. So it's fast when it recognizes it, but it's not good that it didn't. It was a lot better. It was a lot better when I tried it at the event. We'll enable whatever this wants me to. So you notice. Oh, and by the way, you can do it from the lock screen too. or from the always on display. So you don't actually have to wake up the phone for it to see you. So we have an HDR LCD on the Mate 20. We have an AMOLED display on the Mate 20 Pro. 6.39 inches, 3120 by 1440. So they did jack up the resolution this year. It's because it was 1080p with the P20 Pro. It's 19.5 by 9. I'm not a huge fan of how it's curved on the sides, which is kind of similar to the what Samsung does with its phones. The Pro has some other cool features too, like it's IP68 water resistant, which means that you could really drop it in a pool and you'll be all right. You don't want to leave it in there for too long though, because it's, an electronic device with a battery in it that you don't want to get wet. But I digress. All right, 4,200 milliamp hour battery over here, 4,000 milliamp hour battery in the Mate 20. So a big thing in the Mate 20 Pro is that there's finally wireless charging. So a cool thing about that, first of all, I've given Huawei many a hard time about not having wireless charging, especially since the Mate 10 came out last year and they started using glass backs. Because honestly, in my opinion, if you make a phone that has a glass back, it should have wireless charging. Because we have these metal phones, and metal phones, you can't do wireless charging with a metal phone. So the big reason that you would switch to glass or plastic is to add wireless charging, and because it looks prettier. The downside to glass is that glass obviously shatters. So if you're just changing it to glass to make it look prettier, then you're adding a risk with no actual reward. So that's why I always call for wireless charging in a phone, in a glass phone. So now we finally have it. And what's really cool is that you can use this to charge another device. So you have a 4,200 milliamp hour battery on here. So maybe you have a friend who has a phone that has a 2,500 milliamp hour battery. And then all you got to do is you can put your friend's phone on top of it like this, and it's just going to charge. And you might have to turn it on in settings or something, but it's going to charge. And, maybe you get them to 50%. And really, it's not taking too much out of your own, frankly, massive battery. And by the way, can we just talk about how beautiful this is again? I love the gradient color, although you can see how quickly it picked up fingerprints. Like, we've only been doing this for 15 minutes. So it does pick up fingerprints pretty quickly. This one's not as quick. So, by the way, all the colors on both devices are the same. If you get the midnight blue on the P20 Pro, it's going to have this kind of textured back, and I do love it. I do love that it's textured. It's got a little bit more of a grip, so it's not going to feel like it's going to slip out of your hand as easily. That's a big complaint about phones that you'll see. Let's see if I can... I just unlocked the phone right from the sleeping screen there. But that's a big complaint about phones, that especially with glass phones, they feel slippery and they feel like they're just going to fall out of your hands. That's why people get these big bulky cases. So hopefully you'll feel a little more comfortable with this one. You can see that the designs of the phones are a little different. You got the teardrop notch on the Mate 20, more of an iPhone 10 style notch on the Mate 20 Pro. They didn't try to hide it, which is a big trend this year that we're seeing. Google did it with the Pixel 3. Apple did it with the iPhone 10, which is with the stock wallpaper actually is black at the top so you don't see the notch. And you can do that on the Mate 20 Pro. I wanted to call it the P. God, these names are killing me for some reason today. But what you thing is, difference between LCD and AMOLED. LCD, this is entirely backlit. This will give you true blacks because pixels can be turned off. So when you render colors on top of those true blacks, you get more vibrant colors, which is why the Mate 20 Pro looks a little prettier. But you get true blacks. So if you have, say on the iPhone background, right, you have this round shape here. Now you don't see the notch because it's black. And what's cool about OLED though is that you don't really see where the display ends and where the bezels begin when you have black borders. And companies have been using that trick with us a lot. Apple used it with the Apple Watch as well, where you just don't see the borders of the screen. But obviously the newer Apple Watch has narrower bezels. So I can't wait to spend more time with these phones. I can't wait to do some real camera testing, especially with the Pro. I have been looking forward to a successor to the P20 Pro for some time. We've got a Kirin 980 processor in both of these. That means there's a second generation neural processing unit. Now, by the way, 1.4 gigabits per second LTE, which is better than a Snapdragon 845, which has 1.2 gigabits per second. So what's cool about the neural processing unit, there's a dedicated component in here that's for AI and machine learning tasks. And what that was really used for was the camera. And what that'll do is... give you a bunch of pop-ups, apparently. What that'll do is that's meant to show you what the camera's looking at. Obviously, I'm not looking at anything of note right now, although it might if... No, it's not going to do it right now. It might have said, like, wood or something. So what it does is it tells you what the camera's looking at, and it adjusts the settings accordingly. So if I pointed at my dog, it's going to say that I'm looking at a dog, and it's going to adjust those settings accordingly. It works pretty well, unless you hate those kinds of settings that it gives you. But in general, it works pretty well. If you point it at a dog, it actually says dog. It doesn't say, I don't know, cat, which they are separate settings. Probably just for animal lovers. If you have a cat preference, you're going to want it to say cat. But anyway, I digress again. So the thing is, this has been kind of a theme over the last year as well. LG did it with the G7 Thin Q, and the thing is, it doesn't work as well because the Snapdragon 845 doesn't have that dedicated neural processing unit. So this is actually kind of a big deal. Apple has a dedicated neural engine in the A12 Bionic that's in the new iPhones. Qualcomm is going to have it in the Snapdragon 855. So you can see it looks pretty damn good. Okay. And so that's a big deal. It also helps. I don't know if they included Microsoft Translator with the Mate 10, which had the Kirin 970, the first generation neural processing unit. That had a custom version of Microsoft Translator, so you could translate things that was supposed to be faster. Because it had that AI component. It's supposed to help with battery life because it's supposed to learn how you use your device and adjust things accordingly. It's really cool. Huawei is a step of everybody else in that sense of a dedicated hardware component for AI-related tasks. So that's going to be really cool. I'm looking forward to spending more time with the Kirin 980 as well because Huawei is one of few companies that actually makes their own custom chipsets. So 4D Predictive Focus is another thing that's pretty cool too. So that is supposed to use AI to detect when objects are moving. So you ever take a picture of a flower in the wind, you can't really get it to focus. This is supposed to focus ahead of time. So redesigned camera app, which debuted in the Mate 20, the P20 Pro, yeah. So we don't have 4K 60 frames per second video capture. This is disappointing to me. I think that's a great feature that everybody should have by now, but hey, maybe next year. Anyway, guys, that's it for now. I'm going to be spending a lot of time with these devices over the next few weeks, so stay tuned. We're going to have a review. I'm Rich from NeoWin. Have a great night.